Every etymology book says the same thing. Cow is Saxon, beef is Norman, pig is Saxon, pork is Norman. English has two words for every animal because of the Norman conquest of 1066. Peasants raised the animals. Aristocrats ate the meat. Different classes, different words. I've sat through roughly a dozen YouTube videos this week that all tell you this. Merriam-Webster says it. Britannica says it. Stephen Fry says it on the BBC. Every pop linguistics book from Bill Bryson onward repeats it as fact. Here's the problem. That neat version isn't 1,000 years old. It's about 200. And the person who wrote it wasn't a historian. He was a novelist. I'll name him in 3 minutes. The French words really did enter English after 1066. That part's real. But the clean rule you learned, the class war at the dinner table, didn't exist in Shakespeare's English. It didn't exist in the King James Bible. It didn't exist in Samuel Johnson's dictionary. It shows up suddenly in a novel published on December 20th, 1819. That novel is where the story you know actually comes from. 4 centuries of English prose disagree with the rule you were taught. Let me show you. Shakespeare, the King James Bible, and Samuel Johnson all break the rule. 3 pieces of evidence. Any one of them breaks the popular story. Evidence 1, 1596. Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice, Act 1, Scene 3. Shylock says, "A pound of man's flesh taken from a man is not so estimable, profitable neither, as flesh of muttons, beefs, or goats." Beefs, plural. Shakespeare uses it to mean living animals, the same way he uses muttons. If the Saxon animal, Norman meat rule had been locked in for 500 years, Shakespeare's audience wouldn't have followed that line. They did, because the rule didn't exist. Evidence 2, 1611, the King James Bible, Leviticus 22, verse 19. I pulled the original 1611 printing. The verse reads, "Ye shall offer at your own will a male without blemish of the beeves of the sheep or of the goats." The beeves there are living cattle standing in a temple, not meat. A few books over, Isaiah 65 describes the wicked who eat swine's flesh. Old English swine, Old English flesh, no Norman pork. In the single most influential English book ever printed, both systems are running side by side. In 1611, 545 years after the Norman conquest. Evidence 3, 1755. Samuel Johnson publishes the first serious English dictionary. Under beef, he still lists the live ox itself. Johnson quotes Milton's Paradise Lost from 1667. "A herd of beeves, fair oxen, and fair kine." Milton, a century before Johnson, using beeves for walking, breathing animals. 600 years after 1066. The rule was not there. Shakespeare, the King James Bible, Milton, Samuel Johnson. 4 of the heaviest names in English prose, all breaking the rule you were taught, is medieval. Which leaves one question. If the rule wasn't settled in 1755, when did it show up? And who told us it came from the Normans? The 1819 novel that invented the rule. December 20th, 1819, Edinburgh. A publisher called Archibald Constable releases a 3-volume historical novel. Print run 10,000 copies. They sell out. Within a decade, the book is translated across Europe. Within 50 years, it's required reading in English schools. Its name is Ivanhoe. Its author is Sir Walter Scott. Chapter 1. A forest near Sheffield. 2 Saxon characters sit talking in the dirt. Girth is a swineherd. Wamba is a jester. Scott gives Wamba a speech. That speech is the reason you know the word beef. Wamba tells Girth that when the pig runs around in the field under a Saxon slave's charge, it's a swine. But when it's slaughtered, cooked, and carried into the Norman lord's castle hall, it becomes pork. Then Wamba extends it. I'm reading directly from Scott. Quote, "There is old Alderman Ox continues to hold his Saxon epithet, while he is under the charge of serfs and bondsmen such as thou. but becomes beef, a fiery French gallant, when he arrives before the worshipful jaws that are destined to consume him. He is Saxon when he requires tendons, and takes a Norman name when he becomes matter of enjoyment." End quote. That passage, that one fictional speech by a fictional jester in a romance novel from 1819. That is the origin of the story every etymology video on the internet tells you is historical fact. Not the Oxford English Dictionary, not a medieval Norman chronicler, a best-selling novelist. Scott made the Saxon versus Norman class angle vivid and memorable. By the 1850s, Wamba's speech was being quoted in English textbooks. By the 1900s, it was in History of English manuals. In 2026, it's on hundreds of YouTube videos, presented as what actually happened in 1066. The speech was better than the truth, so the speech won. The pushback has been around for decades. It just never travels as well as a good story. Robert Birchfield was editor of the supplement to the Oxford English Dictionary from 1957 to 1986. 29 years of rewriting the most authoritative English dictionary on the planet. A Rhodes Scholar, tutored at Oxford by C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. If any single human has the authority to tell you how English words behave in real texts, it's him. In 1985, Birchfield published a book called The English Language with Oxford University Press. He took the clean Saxon animal Norman meat class rule. He called it, and I'm quoting him, an enduring myth. Not because the French words aren't French, they are. Because the clean binary split is much younger than 1066 and much less tidy than the popular story. The evidence was sitting in the OED files he had spent his life editing. Bill Bryson, in his 1990 book, The Mother Tongue, admits Birchfield's objection in a single footnote and then keeps telling the popular version anyway, because the popular version sells paperbacks. So here is what actually happened. In 1066, French words enter English. Over the next 300 years, beef, pork, mutton, veal, venison settle into the vocabulary next to cow, pig, sheep, calf, deer. For roughly 700 years after that, both systems mix. Both can mean the animal. Both can mean the meat. Only in the 18th and 19th centuries, as the meat words dominate in upper-class usage, does a pattern harden. Then Walter Scott puts a class war spin on it in 1819, and his version becomes the default. The etymology is real. The timing is wrong. The neat rule is a novelist's. What this word split actually reveals. Here's the real thesis. Every time you hear the clean Norman conquest beef story, what you're actually hearing is a jester's speech from a 200-year-old novel, retold so often it feels like fact. This is how popular history usually works. Someone writes a version good enough to remember. Repetition makes it feel true. And the actual messy evidence, Shakespeare, the Bible, Milton, Johnson, 700 years of English speakers cheerfully using beef for living cattle, gets ignored because it doesn't fit the speech. The pattern is everywhere in etymology. The salt for salary story, a Roman footnote inflated into a rule. The Marco Polo assassin legend, a traveler's tall tale that became the textbook. And the cow versus beef class rule, a jester's monologue that swallowed its own history. The Normans brought the words. That's true. Class did play a role. True too. But the clean binary rule you learned is literature pretending to be linguistics. Next time a menu says beef instead of cow or pork instead of pig, remember who's actually speaking through those words. It isn't a Norman aristocrat from 1066. It's a Scottish novelist from 1819, still being quoted by people who don't know they're quoting him.